Wonderful. I think we can go ahead and get started. Greetings and thank you for joining our webinar on advancing methane emissions monitoring and mitigation in India's oil and gas sector. My name is Joey James, and I'm an associate director at Swaneti Global. If you're not familiar with us, Swaneti is a civil society organization working at the nexus of climate and economic development around the world. We're an ecosystem builder working towards a sustainable and equitable future in a climate-constrained world. The event we're hosting today will focus on strengthening methane mitigation efforts in the oil and gas sector by exploring best practices in monitoring and mitigation, identifying opportunities for collaboration, examining advancements in detection and measurement technologies and reporting methodologies, and providing insights to inform the development of policy and regulatory frameworks. We'll hear a bit from our all-star lineup of speakers later on. But before we dive in, I think it's really important for us just to briefly go over the context for the conversation that we're having today. So global climate models have shown that reducing methane emissions is one of the quickest ways to slow global warming. While carbon dioxide often takes center stage in climate discussions, methane, particularly methane emissions originating from the global oil and natural gas sector, is now drawing increasing attention. So methane emissions were a focal point at COP28 in Dubai last year, where 30 national oil companies, including India's own Oil and Natural Gas Corporation, ONGC, pledged to end flaring and achieve near zero upstream methane emissions by 2030. With global energy demand continuing to rise, bold actions like these are essential if humanity is to avoid catastrophic climate outcomes. As we approach COP29 in Baku next month, more ambitious commitments on methane emission reductions are expected, and we'll hear, from those who have already made commitments about their progress. There is immense opportunities for the Indian energy sector. Swaneti Global is committed to advancing the conversation on actionable solutions for the Indian energy sector. While today's conversation zeroes in on the oil and natural gas sector in particular, it's occurring within the backdrop of a much larger effort to prepare India for action on methane. Swaneti will be releasing a report on a years-long effort sometime around the new year, and we look forward to sharing the results of a significant amount of research and efforts to craft actionable solutions for India. I will turn it over to Sandeep Pai, who will be moderating today's session. Sandeep, please take it.
Thanks so much, Joey. First of all, before I start this incredible panel, and I'm so thrilled with the kind of lineup we have, I just want to welcome everybody. I can see that people have joined from all over the world. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are and which part of the world you are in. So this topic of methane emissions in the energy sector is pretty new in India, in the public sphere at least. There's been a lot of work that's happening by companies, but in the public discourse, it's fairly a new topic. So this is one of our first conversations where we're bringing this really important topic in the public domain in India, and it's quite different from in many rich and OECD countries where this is a sort of almost become a mainstream topic. So we're really excited to sort of talk about this, and we've been working on this, like Joey said. So really excited to see how this conversation goes. We have an excellent lineup of speakers. And I will introduce them one by one as I invite them for speaking. The ground rules of this webinar are very simple. We'll keep it quite simple. I will start with each speaker one by one, and I will give them about 10 to 15 minutes. I will start with a open-ended question for them. Um, After the first round, I welcome questions in the Q&A chat box. So, in fact, as you hear presentations and remarks from our speakers, feel free to start asking questions. I will curate all that and in the second round, once each speaker has given their opening remarks, I will direct those questions to them. I also have a bag of questions which I will be ready to launch if there's a dearth of questions. But essentially, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So really encourage everybody to put in their questions in the Q&A function. With that, I think we'll just begin. So I will start with Mr. Deepak Tandon, who is the Executive Director of Carbon Management and Sustainability Group at ONGC, Oil and Natural Gas Corporation of India. For context, ONGC is the largest oil and gas producer in the country, and honestly, Mr. Deepak's role and his actions in the next coming years is quite crucial for India's methane targets, given where he works and given his current role. So I'm extremely delighted and thrilled to have him come and agree to share his perspective on what are the short-term and long-term goals and vision that ONGC has undertaken in order to mitigate methane emissions. Just for one additional context, in the last COP, Conference of Parties 28, ONGC became one of, among other companies, ONGC was one of the signatories of Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter, where companies have pledged to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. So in that very context, the question that I have from Mr. Tandon is like, how is Oil and Gas Corporation of India thinking about short-term and long-term goals and actions for methane mitigation in the oil and gas sector? Sir, over to you. Looking forward to your comments. You have 10 to 15 minutes for your remarks.
Thanks, Sandeep, giving me this opportunity on sharing my thoughts. And one thing I would like to comment initially is whatever I am giving, these are my thoughts. These are not the opinion of my company. These are my personal opinion. Or whatever I am saying, I am giving these things on my personal capacity. Our company may have a different opinion or strategy, since these are some of the things which cannot be divulged in open forum. Now, coming to the OGDC, we, being a signatory to OGDC, we have committed to reduce methane emissions to near zero through operations, which are the fugitive methane emissions. And this journey, I would say ONGC has been the first non-US company to sign an MOU with US EPA to undertake earlier, which was methane to market. Then there was a GMI initiative of USPA. We were the first non-US company who has signed this MOU with USPA. By signing US EPA, we have committed that we will take initiatives to global methane initiatives, which is an action-oriented program wherein direct inspection and maintenance of equipments are being undertaken. Through this initiative, till date, we have saved arrested methane emissions to the tune of approximately 0.3 million metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent of. As you know, the as per oil and gas industry is one of the significant emitter, and it is a 30 billion US dollar revenue loss every year. Then you will say why the people are not giving importance to this subject. There are challenges, there are uh, problems associated it. Once we have signed OGDC, we have changed our approach of measuring and monitoring of our methane emissions. Earlier, through the use of this US EPA program, we used to conduct only handheld surveys using OGI cameras. The earlier versions were not able to quantify. Then there were some methods, indirect methods, which we were using it for the quantification of leakages, etc. But since we have got approximately 161 sites, it is humanly difficult to undertake this GMI surveys for our your entire installations during the year, particularly during the adverse weather condition, because during monsoons also, as well as during if the temperatures are high, these helium gas cooled cameras are built with the systems that they shut down automatically. So what through OGIs we can cover maximum 1 to 5 site per day. That is based on the PID diagrams. Now, after signing OGDC, or maybe you can say prior to OGDC, some 6 months back, we have adopted top-down approach. That is, we started monitoring our sites of the methane emissions using open source, that is Tropima, that is a global methane mapper through which we can monitor a distance of say 2000. It has a swath of 2600 meters, but it has got its own limitation. That is, you have to have a certain amount of threshold plumb concentration of methane, then only it was able to detect. And to undertake to address this problem, we have also entered into memorandum of cooperation with the Total Energies for undertaking drone surveys using IUSA technology to identify the hot spots in a particular region from where the methane emissions are coming. Because what we have observed, that 90% of the methane emission contributor are only 10 to 20% site. So by monitoring the methane through satellites, we are able to identify the hotspots. Once we have identified the hotspots, we start undertaking optical gas imaging surveys using handheld devices. Now the devices are such thermographical, these instruments are such advanced that they, besides giving the concentration, they also quantify the amount of leakage which is occurring from that particular source of emissions. So this is what we have done, but because of the weather constraints, we can undertake these surveys only from the say month of October till March, because weather does not permit to undertake these surveys round the clock. Then coming to this thing, what exactly some of the challenges are there, since we are also monitoring, most of our sites are remote, we are managing brownfield. And there are instances when we have to make a decision whether to undertake that repair or not, because sometimes undertaking a repair of a point source may require complete shutdown of wells to replace those assets to mitigate these methane emissions. So, and there is a chance that it is that well may not flow back, and the tropema has a limitation because of the cloud cover, adverse weather condition of high wind speeds. It may not able to give us the correct picture of the amount of methane concentration in the atmosphere. And if more than 2 to 3 emitters are available, then also it is very difficult to distinguish it. Plus, nighttime measurements are not possible. Plus, of the data of our offshore installations is also not possible. Every day, this European agency satellite comes around about 12:40 or 12:50 p.m. At India, and from there we get these data. But this data is not that fine as fine what methane set is going to transmit to us. So these are some of the challenges which we are facing for the methane mitigation. And let us hope that this drone surveys, etc., we are able to conduct at earliest, so that we are able to identify and quantify what are those instruments which are giving us problem, and we can go for the maintenance practices, preventive maintenance, like early replacement of say compressor seals, etc. Then we can develop those, replace some of the pneumatic things with the air systems. So all these measures are in place to reduce methane emissions, because the more emissions you reduce, the more revenue you are going to earn. This is our motto, and let's hope by 2030, since this is the low-hanging fruit, these are some of the things which we have started taking actions on methane emissions. That's all from my side, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tandon, for explaining the opportunities and the challenges. Let me move over to Irina and allow Irina. I think, Irina, you have some slides, but let me introduce her before she shares her slides. So our next speaker is Dr. Irina Semikina, who is a senior consultant at Carbon Limits. Now, Carbon Limits has a really, really interesting tool called MIST that basically helps create methane inventory and help prioritization of mitigation actions around methane. So I'm also equally excited to hear from Irina about both, how other organizations and oil and gas companies around the world are using this tool, but as well as like how can Indian stakeholders learn from this tool, and how can they basically move this forward using your tool and your experience, and how can Carbon Limit help in that regard? So Irina, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you're right. And I will try to answer why I'm doing the presentation. Let me share the slides. So as Sandeep presented, I'm a senior consultant with Carbon Limits. We are a consultancy that is based in Norway, but we are working all over the world in so-called meaningful countries where our actions and actions of the oil and gas companies can contribute to the largest emission reductions. So we are working on decarbonization. Historically, we are working on decarbonization of oil and gas systems, including and focusing mostly on methane emissions. So we do inventories, we do different capacity building activities, support measurement campaigns. Also, we were involved in developing best practices, guides, and other international standards. So this is the map of our projects. As you can see, we're working in Central Asia, in the Middle East, a bit in Africa, Europe, and Americas. And what we see at the moment, and this event by Svaneti Global today shows us that methane mitigation is gaining momentum in India. And we know that both ONGC and Oil India Limited are now part of the Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter. So that means that these major Indian companies are committed to reducing methane emissions below 0.2% intensity by 2030. So when we are talking about methane mitigation, and what is important to understand that in order to have effective methane mitigation, in order to develop the plan, we need to understand where emissions are coming from. What are the major sources of emissions? And then once we have it, we can do the economic analysis, or how we do it is a marginal abatement cost curve. So we build a curve showing us the mitigation potential of certain measures and the cost of these measures. So this is why we believe that the better inventory we develop in the first place, the better mitigation plan and more precise and more accurate and effective plan we can develop. And if we look at any methodologies out there, if we take, for example, how national level emission inventories should be built. So, for example, here is what countries submit to the UNFCCC. We have different tiers. So depending on the data that we have, the quality of inventory can be different. And what is recommended, obviously, to move to higher tiers, meaning that we should not limit ourselves to using just generic emission factors, which are not country-specific, not facility-specific, to more precise and more specific emission factors. So in this case, for national inventories, that will be moving from default emission factors to maybe more country-specific, and more variables are required to make a quantification of emissions in tier 2, and to tier 3, where it is preferable that countries use direct measured emissions or emission factors based on measurements. If we talk about corporate level inventories, it's the same. So here's an example of the Oil and Gas Methane Partnership, and they have 5 reporting levels, again, moving from very basic level 1, 2, based on generic emission factors, level 3 as well, to preferred level 4 and even level 5, where direct measurement should be involved. So obviously we understand that both approaches have their pros and cons. So here, for example, we tried to kind of look at both good and bad sides of calculation-based approaches to emissions quantification to measurement-based one. And obviously, I highlighted here with different colors. Calculation-based may be easier to collect data, obviously, because we need less data, but we have a high level of uncertainty. And so as a result, we have some inventories which might be not that actionable. So with measurement-based approaches, we can get insights into level of methane emissions, obviously, and emissions can be attributed to individual sources. This way, it allows us to have a clear picture of what are our major emission sources and how to deal with them. So speaking about emission sources, these are the major sources that we look into. So this can be equipment, can be processes that lead to methane emissions. And this equipment, as you can see, and the processes can be in upstream, midstream, downstream. So along the oil and gas supply chain, we have compressors, we have storage tanks. So basically, these are emission sources that are built into our program, in our tool, MIST, that Sandeep has also mentioned. So MIST is a tool that Carbon Limits has developed, and now it is in use by the oil and gas operators, so it's free to use, and it allows to create an inventory of methane emissions attributed to these emission sources. And we constantly adding new emission sources. So at the moment there are 26, if I remember correct. So for each emission source, MIST allows to have emission volume, depending on data quality. I will talk about it later. It allows to show abatement potential, depending on the mitigation option selected, and abatement cost that is required in order to implement this mitigation option. So in MIST, and going back to our different levels or different quality of data, we have 3 levels with red, yellow, and green, which are based on different data input. So if we use built-in MIST basic emission factors, we have red quality data, which is compatible with OGMP level 2 or 3. And we can use advanced emission factors. This will be the case where we have more input data, more precise activity data, for example, for compressors, that will be hours of operating, throughput, hours in standby, and different characteristics of compressors. So more input data. And the highest level would be based on measurement or engineered calculations. This level already aligned with the OGMP level 4. Now I want to mention something else that Carbon Limit has developed. And as Mr. Tandon mentioned, for different emission sources, really, there is no one technology that fit all the purposes. So with satellites have their limitations as well. They don't work very well offshore during the night with cloud coverage. So they're useful for certain spatial scale and certain time scale, whether there are other detection and measurement technologies that are more suitable for different scales, different purposes, going down to the ground-based fixed sensors, for example, or some equipment that is or can be used on a source level. So what Carbon Limits also did is this, in collaboration with IOGP, IPCA, and OGCI, all these industry associations, we have developed this recommended practices document for methane emission detection and quantification technologies. Our team, I was not a part of, but if you're interested to look at these recommended practices, and I think it's very useful for operators to understand what are the technologies out there for different purpose. So how it works, this recommended practices document is supplemented by a technology filtering tool. So it's free and open source. You can just scan the QR code, go online. And what it allows you, an operator, to do is to select the preliminary preference, the area characteristics, aim of deployment, technology characteristics, and then technology validation. So based on these 5 criteria, the tool will provide a list of technologies that are out there. So there will be the name, the technology provider, what kind of technology is it, and then where it is used. So you can imagine if you filter according to your purpose, then you get this list. And then if you click on any of them, you get to the this kind of data sheet. And this is just part of the information for every technology out there. There will be characteristics of this technology. And so I think this is something that I wanted to mention as we are talking about measuring methane emissions. So a lot of things are out there, but it's great to understand which is the best for a purpose that an operator has. And so in MIST, for example, if an operator can use not just basic or advanced emission factors right here, we can, for example, additionally select the results of measurement or engineering calculations. This will provide us with a more precise picture of emissions, where all these red bubbles, for example, will be replaced with green ones showing emissions per facility, per emission source. And so this will lead us to the marginal abatement cost curve, which shows per emission source and mitigation option selected, what can be abated at no net cost and what requires a certain amount of investment, and therefore in the end over the lifetime of the project it's do not fall into this category, but still maybe a preferred option, for example, here. So this is MIST, and MIST is currently deployed with 12 operators around the world. And yeah, you can obviously check online. We have 2 public case studies with the Iraqi Ministry of Petroleum and also Petroecuador, the Ecuador national oil company. At the moment, these 2 are openly described online. And the last point for MIST, how it can be used. So we mentioned that ONGC and the Oil India Limited are both part of Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter. And just last week, they published the IEA, the UNEP, and EDF. They developed this accountability framework to track progress toward reaching goals set up by OGDC. And so we checked that MIST actually can support in tracking progress in 9 out of 25 indicators. So obviously building inventory with MIST, as I mentioned, but also because MIST can provide you with the best mitigation options and associated costs. That gives, I think, a good benefit for an operator if they need to report against those indicators. So I think this is what I wanted to share with you. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, of course.
Thank you, Irina, for that excellent presentation. I have a lot of questions which I will come to you, but let's, in the interest of time, let's move to Dr. Naveen Raj. So Dr. Naveen Raj is a senior consultant and head of environment at the Oil and Gas Safety Directorate under the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. He's been working in this space for over 40 years, and he was also in ONGC some time ago. So he brings in that very perspective from the government side. So I think, your question, I have a very natural question to you, Dr. Raj, which is, all the work that is happening in the methane mitigation space in the oil and gas sector in India, it's fairly voluntary. I mean, it is happening at a company level. There signing MOUs, they're joining the charter, etc. But are we at a stage in India where we could or we should look at the regulatory role of ministries and regulations around methane mitigation, or how do you think about that? And if currently it's not the right time, when would it be the right time for that? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sandeep. So the first thing I'll just a little bit differ that regulatory approaches, it's available. The problem is with implementation. I'll tell you how. If you see the three major sources of this methane emission is fugitive emission, flaring, and venting. So coming to last, the cold venting is not allowed. That is as per EPA rules of 1986 of India. It exists and it is applicable to all the industry. As far as flaring is concerned, so flaring is because of the technical issues. Flaring has to be 100% flaring so that at least methane you can overcome. But the issue with flaring is that even if it is 100% time of lighting is there, and even then 2% of methane escapes, which amounts a lot. And regarding this fugitive emission, that is the source where we have to address the issue. The main thing with the energy sector is, that is rather I'll say that is advantage, we know the source of emission. And once you know the source of emission, the remedial measure putting up over there is possible. What we are talking now that globally, how unlike other sectors like waste, the methane from waste, methane from agriculture, there it's very difficult to pinpoint the source. Energy sector, at least in oil and gas sector, we know the source. So it's easy to tap, easy to restrict over there. So how it can be done? So once cold flaring is not allowed, if someone is doing, the problem is with implementation because that EPA rule 1986 is applicable all over India. The second thing, as far as oil and gas industry is concerned, there is a standard. That is itself is there is a OSD standard 224, which categorically denies that anywhere where emission is there you have to implement LDAR, leak detection and repair system. So, and that is required also from safety point of view. So in oil and gas industry, it's quite feasible. Even if we don't do anything with the existing method, the overall emission of methane or VOC, I can say, that 40% can be restricted without any extra expenditure or capital investment on that. So now we have to focus over there. Now, what required is there? That is zero tolerance approach. Right now, what I am talking, it is very difficult. But the thing is that the approach has to be changed. And zero tolerance approach, when you are talking bottom up, you know your installations. You know the point of leakages. I agree that monitoring is difficult right now, but since you know the source, there are certain cases like pipelines. Pipelines goes to a larger area where if any repair work or anything takes place in pipeline for that particular time, some venting is unavoidable. That venting will take place. But as far as our regular installations are concerned, oil and gas, whether it is refinery, whether it is large tanks, whether it is any source, we know that from breathing wall of the tank, methane is emitting. So that source we have to tap over there. Secondly, as I talked of zero tolerance approach, before that, MRV approach, which is worldwide everywhere being used, monitoring, reporting, and verification. That is required, and we are already talking for that, how to go with that. So, zero routine flaring by 2030, which has been mandated by the Ministry to oil and gas installations, that has to be achieved. There are difficulties, but there are ways out, and that will be done. Leak sources are already known. Instrumentation in oil and gas sector, instrumentation is very, very of high level. So with that instrumentation, even at installation level, we are able to detect, we can very well detect the sources and we can apply the remedial measures over there. So the second thing is of this the oil and gas sector is a very centralized sector, and there with this type of instrumentation it is very much possible. So two things I'll say: that incomplete flaring is to be addressed. Flaring, even if, as I told you, even if it is 100%, 2% methane is escaping. But right now, the main thing is that there is not 100% flaring. Even in spite of that, some coal flaring is already there. And we need to focus how to reduce the gas going to flare. The amount of gas which we are releasing to flare because of the technical reasons. So reduction of that gas is very, very important. So with that, I mean to say that as far as the regulations are concerned, they are available. It is up to the industry. And if we compare with the other industry, oil and gas industries are already has chalked out their plan. They have already started implementing their plan. And I'm sure that oil and gas sector will be the first sector to address the issue efficiently. Your first question was my views on your first question was.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is very, very helpful to get that big picture view from you. So we have already gotten a bunch of questions. I also have some questions. So what I will do is I will club my questions with the incoming questions. I once again want to encourage everybody to type in their questions. We have a good amount of time to get to most of the questions. And I will take those questions in the order they're coming. So I'll start with the first question. This question is to Irina. The question is, why should companies go for tier 3 approach if it's not a key category, and at the same time such measurement campaigns are also resource intensive? So yeah. Why should they?
See, I'd answer, what goal do we have? If we have a goal of reducing methane emissions, then probably we should go for it, because yes, measurement campaigns are resource intensive, no doubt with that, and detection, any LDAR campaign. But the more you do LDAR at your facilities, the less probability you will detect something in the future, because you kind of repairing leaks, you're fixing and replacing equipment. And so definitely with time, you change your practices and then reduce emissions. So we're talking, yes, maybe it's not the key category, but as I think Dr. Raj mentioned, the oil and gas industry is very unique. So unlike agriculture and unlike waste, in the oil and gas industry, methane is a product that can be monetized. So that's a very big difference why we are talking about this sources of emissions. And I think, if the goal is to reduce emissions, if the goal is to reduce our efforts and to comply with the, I don't know, minimum limited regulations, that's the other approach, of course.
Great. Next, I will turn over to Mr. Tandon. You have a few questions, so I will try to club them together. The first question is ONGC trying to partner with other NOCs in this effort? The second, actually kind of connected question is, how can ONGC's work nudge other oil and gas players to act? Can collaboration among peers? I think the spirit of both the questions are like, how can ONGC collaborate with others, especially other NOCs? And with your efforts, given your leadership in this space, do you think there is a nudging effect here for other companies to act as well?
See, already we helped GAIL in developing their leak detection plans. Based on, way back in 2012-13, we undertook their survey also. Okay. So as far as collaborations with NOC is concerned on methane mitigation, we are already collaborating with the GAIL. Oil has not approached us, so we don't know about that. But whosoever is approaching or whomsoever we are approaching, we are getting, say, uh, like in the resource library, which Dr. Arena was telling, you mentioned it, Teledyne flare, that is a OGI camera. And a narrative Obgal, an Israeli firm, also produces same quality of camera. ONGC was using Teledyne flare and GAIL was using Obgal till 23. Then we approached GAIL to know their experiences with the Obgal because we had some bad experience with the Teledyne. They gave us that they never faced and now they are going to upgrade it. We asked for the specification for their tender. They and both of us floated the tender almost at the same time. They are purchasing flare now. We have shifted to Obgal. So collaborations are always there. Yes, in the field of you can say satellite technology, which recently we have introduced in from August 23 only for detection of methane concentration. There we are in talks with the ISRO also for in-house developing in-house measurement techniques, since the commercial satellites like GHG, etc., they are charging us $0.3 million for bi-weekly data on an annual basis. That tantamounts to $48.3 million for our 161 sites. Spending this much huge money just for the detection purpose is quite, as of now, it is not commercially viable. So we are looking for some other solutions from the ISRO and other agencies to give us some viable solutions so that the data can be achieved without incurring such huge cost. One of the startups have already come up and they have developed algorithms, and they are measurement verification, what we have reported, and through their Landsat imageries, they have calculated some emissions. The difference between their calculations based on the satellite images and us is just 10%. Mind you, just 10% variation is there, whereas in the Saudi Aramco's case, what they were claiming, the difference was 55%, what they have reported and what exactly the satellite is showing. So that shows how much mature level ONGC is at reporting their emissions, as far as whether it is a methane emissions or scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. We are very close, because once on the satellite data, if there is only 10% less what we are reporting and there is a difference, that is quite explainable.
Thank you, sir. While you're here, there's two more questions and then we'll circle back to Naveen Raj. One, you actually touched upon this point, like, the costs associated with just sort of measuring. And so one question is about, is the real challenge technical or economical? And how much?
I have already in my talk, I have touched upon these things, that most of the infrastructure is aging. It's 40-year-old or 50-year-old. That requires huge investment. You may require to replace a particular set of, say, compressor, or say pipelines which are corroded, which cannot be repaired from the flanges where you are experiencing leakages. That requires shutting down of wells. And most of our fields are brownfield. There is a chance once we carry out this repair campaign and then we start to open those wells, the well may not revive. Then you have India being an import dependent country for its energy needs, since 85% of our oil is imported from the other part of the world. Some of these economic decisions needs thorough analysis before taking these repair and campaign. These are some of the major challenges right now we are facing.
Thank you very much. Now I'll move to Dr. Naveen Raj. There's a few questions that I will club for you. The first question is, can you please cite again the regulations in place for LDAR? There is a larger question about, like, do we need to have some industry-wide policy on methane emissions so that one company is not burdened disproportionately and financial burden is shared equitably? There's a third question. I'm not sure if you have information on this, but how much LDAR and VRU technology is currently being used in India? So, Dr. Naveen Raj, over to you.
So I'll just first answer the third question. The LDAR is being used. It is being monitored. There is a system, there is a frequency that has been laid down, at least in midstream and downstream. There is a charter of monitoring leak detection through their online gas detection system or the manual gas detection system. And there is a fixed frequency where they are maintaining the schedule and they are monitoring it. And once they come to know, they are addressing to it. Second is about the legal system. That yes, legal system is in place and it is for overall. I'll give you example that in downstream, wheresoever the flares are there, all flares are connected to Central Pollution Control Board server at Delhi. And that is mandatory. And there is 24/7 monitoring of the emission from the flare system. And by chance, if flare is not functioning or there is any mishappening there, immediately it triggers at the central level at Central Pollution Control Board control center. And then the remedial measures are being taken. One more question was there. Can you repeat that? Second question.
I think the last question was really about, like, whether there should be some policy. I think I touched upon this, but like, so that it's not about industry just doing, but there is larger support. So one company is not disproportionately and financially burdened by this. Because I mean, the spirit of this question, if I can add my own 2 cents to this, is like, yes, the methane problem, one can say, is like, okay, these companies are emitting, so they need to address, but they are drilling for the country. So is there a way to compensate them or collaborate with them on this by having a policy framework?
I'll touch upon that. Generally a misnomer that drilling, a lot of methane is getting emitted. The drilling process is a very controlled process where you use a lot of drilling fluid, lot of technology, and everything is there. It happens once you approach the zone, producing zone from where you are producing. And once you have approached that zone, at that time, you just tap it. You have got a very strong system in drilling. There are several instrumentation, download equipment, packers, and everything is there. So the release of continuous release, that is only happening when some mishappening is taking place during drilling, like blowout or something like that, and you have addressed some gas zone like that. Otherwise, during drilling, it's not. The continuous emission is mostly from the processing side. When you are producing it, you are taking it to your manifold, then you are taking to your tanks, you are taking to the transporting through pipelines, these are the area where the emission is likely to happen. So for that, in fact, every industry have their own plan. And what we are talking, see, when we are talking of the monitoring at the installation level, it's very difficult to differentiate with the other sources, which is non-oil and gas sources, how it is mixing, how it is happening. Sometimes we see the report that Vizag refinery, over the refinery, we have got at certain period, certain gas emissions is there. I agree that happens. During the turnaround period, when the refinery goes for turnaround, there is a quite a scope of gas emission during that period. And the pollution control board and everything, they are monitoring. But I think that technology has to see it with the improved technology, how to reduce that. So these are the certain things, because oil and gas operations are very, very complex operation. If you go from ENP, from offshore to this place, it's really big. And main concentration is that in offshore it is quite difficult, because in offshore whatever process and system you are putting up over there, the monitoring everything, as Arina has explained and Deepak has explained, that in offshore this monitoring during the night time, there are certain limitations. But at least in on land, our installation system, it is very, very much feasible to tap max of that. As I told you, 40% emission can be checked without any much investment, only with the present monitoring system at the installation level and attending the leakage points at that point. So these are the points which I can say.
That's great. Great. Thank you for explaining all that. We have one question that Dr. Ajay Kumar has been raising. I don't know, Anjana, if we can unmute him. He was the head scientist of Simfer, and he's almost like a pioneer in this space, especially in the coal bed methane space. So would love to hear from you. Sir, if you can be brief, that will be great, because we have completely run out of time.
Yeah, I shall be very brief, and thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sandeep, Deepak, Irina, and Naveen. I enjoyed all the talks. To the best of my knowledge, anyone of you can answer, especially Naveen and Deepak. I'm a researcher who has been involved in development of fugitive methane emission factor from India's coal mining sector and oil and natural gas systems as well. I have been doing this job from the first national communication of India to third national communication on behalf of Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. My question is, we are aware that ONGC, GAIL and other companies do have this carbon management sustainability group, and a lot of measurement have been done as challenges are there. However, measurement data is available with the companies. My question is, sir, is it possible to share the emission factor activity wise to enable the researchers, and if not researchers, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change to use the emission factor for different activities of oil and natural gas system to arrive at a reasonably good emission estimates with lowest value of uncertainty in their estimate. And for your information, sir, for coal mining and handling activities, we have done a good job, and at present we are able to report tier 3 level of emission estimates. This is the question, sir. Is it possible to prepare the emission factor for different activities so that we can prepare a reasonably good estimate?
So this is an open-ended question, I think. So anyone who wants to answer.
Deepak, would you like to answer this or should I?
आप बताइए फिर मैं कर दूंगा सप्लीमेंट.
Okay, I think you start first and then.
Sir, data sharing is not a problem. As far as MOIF is concerned, I don't know that they have hired some consultants for this BU. Most probably you are talking of BUR 3 report or something like that, which India submitted for the NDC under NDC disclosure. Correct, sir?
Actually, question is activity-wise emission data is talking.
सर एक्टिविटी वाइज में आपने बताया ना कि हमारा तो मेनली जो भी हमारा emissions हो रहे हैं दैट आर इन आइदर आप कोल्ड वेंटिंग कर रहे हैं which is prohibited yet it is happening, or you are doing it 2% is in the flare, and another fugitive emissions as per IPCC guidelines you are between 4 to 8% you can report it. So fugitive methane emissions we are detecting using LADR. That data can be shared with them.
My question is how to get this information. We tried our best, but we could not.
Disclosure.
You can guide us how to proceed.
Sir, with whom you have contacted?
Sir, the advisor of Ministry of Environment and Forest wrote to Secretary Petroleum and Natural Gas, and then the Secretary wrote to CMD ONGC.
Correct. When this happened, sir?
Sir, long back, 2 years back.
Sir, 2 years.
And I personally visited
No,
ONGC.
Singh sir, 2 years back, let me admit, there was issue with our OGI cameras.
Okay.
So now we have procured new OGI cameras, and only 5% sample we have undertaken. Today itself, we have sent one indent for the undertaking these surveys through certified thermographers. So most probably by March, we will be completing Uran and Hazira plants emissions. We will be undertaking these detailed surveys. Okay. So data will be available with us maybe next June or July.
Okay. Thank you. We have completely run out of time, but let's end with Dr. Naveen Raj. If you want to supplement anything on this, take us home. And we are absolutely over time. So if you want to share any last thoughts on this, and then we'll close.
So as far as energy sector is concerned, I think Dr. Ajay's question is already explained by Deepak, and regarding data sharing for emission factor monitoring. And what I say that in oil and gas sector, if we see from our side, whole oil and gas industry in India, downstream, upstream, and midstream, there is a plant already in place for this emission control. As I told you, to strengthen, what we need is that MRV we have already talked. So what company need to invest in technology improvement? Number two, transition to renewable energy is already in the basket of every oil and gas company. Incorporating green hydrogen in industrial process, and that is already in downstream, at least in all the refineries, there is some for green hydrogen. They have taken up the product, and they are coming out with they have already started producing green hydrogen to some extent. That is a very, very initiative stage, but I am sure in coming 4 or 5 years, as Reliance, they have promised that right now the green hydrogen is costing them $4 to $5. They are expecting within 2 years to bring down to $2.5, and their ultimate aim is to $1. And this is the company which Dhirubhai Ambani, who was a visionary when the Infocom sector was developing and they came in Infocom, then he said, we will be successful only when people will be able to communicate in 15 paisa, which was the cost of postcard. And that reality that has happened. So I think with this some vision of the Reliance and other, and then the utilization of biofuel and CCUS. These all are all the companies, they have already planned it. They are going ahead with this. Someone has given 2027 target, some 2030. But by given the target of zero emission to every companies, I hope, I'm sure that with every passing time, we'll see the lot of improvement.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's such an exciting conversation that we could go on and on. There's so much to discuss, there's so much to deliberate, but I hope that this was first of many such conversations on, this really, really crucial topic of advancements in methane mitigation in the oil and gas sector. We hope to do a similar session in the future on coal mine methane as well. So really, really thankful to all the audiences who have joined. And once again, thank you to all three speakers. We really, really appreciate your time. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.